Greetings, my soil mates. It is so good to see you, and it is so great to be here. It's an honor to be here. Does anyone remember my talk back from 2021? Oh my gosh, I am so happy because I was seriously anticipating crickets. As a gentle reminder for the rest of you, it was titled Decade of Action, subtitled Harmony with Nature. It's Harmony with Nature, and Sustainable Development and Event 301. Yes, that's a mouthful. And, you know, we're so close to lunch, I'm thinking nobody's going to catch the bug jokes. Anyway, I hopefully successfully merged a few topics that, when added up, revealed a horrible equation: globalism, hyper-environmental activism, the stolen land and harmony with nature movements, and human rights legalism given to things like rivers and Mother Earth equals the decay of private property rights and ownership, the loss of freedom and liberty, and the entry point to, if man can give you your rights, certainly the evil, greedy ones will take them away. I also posed the question of, what would be the next big event after COVID, calling it Event 301, knowing it must include some doubling down against the sovereignty of individuals and states, with permanent ramifications from Event 101 and Event 201. The foundation against self-governance had already been laid. Most of us had heard about Event 201, where the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Johns Hopkins hosted a UN-supporting elitist roundtable confab, predicting a global pandemic so large it would be life-altering. And lo and behold, 2 months later, December 2019, we started hearing about COVID-19. For the following 3 years, we lived the head-shaking lockdowns, shutdowns, forced vaccinations, or alienation, finger-pointing, and job firing if you didn't. And forevermore, the after effect exists. California led the way as the strictest, by the executive order abusing already campaigning wannabe President Gavin Newsom, a do-as-I-say hypocrite, can I say maybe even a tyrant. Researching Event 201 had me wondering, what was Event 101? The worldwide spider web led me to Johns Hopkins and an internal post-9/11 disaster protocol they called Event 101. If you flew here commercially, you likely participated in the privacy-invading aftereffects of 9/11. Thus, in this room, scientific fact, I was younger back then, we tossed around ideas of what would be Event 301. Will it be another pandemic, a major war, a gun grab? Will it be a World Wide Web shutdown? Will it be an EMP, UFO, aliens? In other words, what would be so big that the majority of the world would fall to its knees again? We even alleged a global food crisis. And since the rollout of the Great Resets, COVID-19, Klaus Schwab and world leaders still urge of coming one. Klaus said, we only have one planet, and we know that climate change would be the next global disaster, with even more dramatic consequences for humankind. We have to decarbonize the economy in the short window still remaining and bring our thinking and behavior once more into harmony with nature. No matter what I'm labeling as Event 301, there will be some sort of food crisis. Raise your hands, please, if you've noticed food prices rising. How about skyrocketing? Have any of you noticed your favorite food item missing from the store shelf? My morning favorite is organic heavy whipping cream with my Fabula brand coffee. And so often these days I have to settle for half and half. Seriously, that is like putting cold water in my hot coffee. And I live in California, the #1 dairy producing state, the #4 beef producing state. We produce half of all the fruits and vegetables grown in the United States of America, including 99% of America's almonds, pistachios, pomegranates, walnuts. We are the nation's leading grower of lima beans, lemons, kumquats, raspberries, strawberries, and spinach. We also produce hay, alfalfa, pasture, grain, rice, and we provide an abundance of plant and wildlife such that our beautiful state of California is considered one of the 7 hotspots according to the United Nations. Yet we ranchers and farmers, food and fiber producers are being blamed for unprecedented biodiversity loss and global warming. California's agriculture industry creates more than $50 billion annual revenue, employs more than 420,000 people to produce over 400 commodities up and down our state. Our shelves should always be plumb full, but they're not. And the prices should always be affordable, and they're certainly not. Besides being at the top in agriculture, we've enjoyed the boom tech of high-tech, biotech, Hollywood, and all of that and more has made us a leading world economy for decades. Over the past 10 interesting years, 9 of those years, the Speaker of the House is Californian. While it may sound like I'm bragging about California, I'm not. I'm just trying to set up the point that while we do great things and have leaders in high places, we also elect, employ, and encourage leaders in the business of destroying the comfort, joy, security, and well-being of humans. All too often lately, the way California goes, so does the nation. We might be the first, we are not the last, and we're certainly not the only, and that is my warning. Cap and trade, we were the first. The largest dam destruction project in worldwide history happening right now as we gather here. I'll discuss this dam issue later. Have you heard of the 30 by 30? If unfamiliar, the 30 by 30 is a global plan of conserving 30% more land and water by the year 2030, just in time to realize the United Nations 2030 agenda. Last year, a few of us in the room attended a 30 by 30 conference in Nebraska, where credible speakers like Becky and James discussed Biden's 30 by 30 executive order, highlighting its far-reaching goals and unconstitutionality. But Biden was not the first. Politicon Gavin Newsom created a 30 by 30 executive order first, October 2020, and 3 months later, within Biden's first week in office, signed a similar order for the entire country. There they are sitting together. The headline is, Biden 80 and Newsom 55 actively warm a bench at a nature preserve in Palo Alto, California, while wishing they were spending that $600 million of U.S. taxpayer money to save planet Earth at the French Laundry. Juneteenth, 2023. Just kidding, that's a fake headline. I made it up. Not surprisingly, the United Nations identified this scheme, the 30 by 30, decades ago. Some of you may remember this Crook book, the Lords of Scarcity Bible. I call it the Crook book. And in this book, it's a 1994-95 publication. It's 1,140 pages, thick and heavy. It says this in a section called Protection and Management of Fragments. We're talking land fragments. We're talking natural habitat fragments. And what it's talking about here is where fragmentation is ongoing. This can be achieved by ensuring that the remaining native vegetation is arranged optimally as far as we can determine with current knowledge. This means that representative areas of all major ecosystems in a region need to be reserved, that blocks should be as large as possible, that buffer zones should be established around core areas, and that corridors should connect these areas. This basic design is central to the recently proposed Wildlands Project in the United States, NOS 1992, a controversial, long-term strategy, 100 to 200 years, to expand natural habitats and corridors to cover, get this, as much as 30% of the US land area. It goes on to say, while this basic recipe appears simple and perhaps overambitious, the actual selection of core areas and of priority areas for reservation can be problematic and must be linked to clear conservation objectives. As a rancher with a land that is rich in biodiversity, do you think it's problematic that if you claim my private property is a biodiversity hotspot for your, conservation agendas in the 21st century? Do you think if you claim my property should be part of that big global plan, do you think that's problematic? You bet you. It goes on to say, like I said, that this could be problematic. Here's Reed Noss in a 2018 presentation to Missoulians, Montanans. Now, Reed Noss he's a retired professor of the James, you may have to help me, but Florida's Central University? Okay, that's it. But anyway, listen tight to what he has to say. This is, again, back in 2018.
I was a grad student back in the 80s. I devised a conceptual framework for a statewide network of conservation areas across Florida. Now, the real map was very detailed. We didn't have GIS back then, okay? So it was a paper map, a wall map, 1 to 500,000 scale, on which I put overlays, okay, to draw these corridors and core areas and buffer zones and so on. So this is a very simplistic artist's rendition of that network. Now, as you might imagine, this was perceived at the time as being somewhat radical. It actually appeared after a conference we had on the front pages of newspapers in the state. My advisor was about ready to fire me. He'd kick me out of the university. But, curiously enough, within just a few years, state agencies and mainstream conservation groups like the Nature Conservancy and Florida Audubon Society were starting to kind of secretly refine my map, improve it, and use it to identify priorities for land acquisition.
Priorities for land acquisition.
And similarly, some other states now have developed similar networks, especially California, I think, provides a really good example.
Reed Noss, Professor Reed Noss, is quoted quite extensively in this Global Crookbook. And things that are highlighted as unsustainable in the 21st century are horrible human activities like skiing and ski runs and roads and dams and fences and all sorts of livestock, Judeo-Christian principles and religion, and of course our bad Western dietary habits, like eating meat. Such a bad thing. Quoting a distinguished retired another university speaker, is Michael Soule, who's a partner with Reed Noss, and they also came up with the ideas of cores, corridors, and carnivores for rewilding America. With future implementation of corridors, buffer zones, and connectivity of biodiversity hotspots and more conservation areas, this 30 by 30 will be more like 50 by 50, the Half-Earth Project. 50% more land under precise control or possibly acquired by government agencies, environmental non-government organizations, willing players of the conservation easements by the year 2050. According to the Council on Foreign Relations in March 2023, Indian communities, Native American, indigenous communities are calling for upwards of 80% of all land and water. As an aside, the Inflation Reduction Act provides $19.5 billion over 5 years to fund the USDA's Agriculture Conservation Easement Program. The IRA, part of the President's Investing in America agenda, represents the single largest investment in climate and green energy in American history. And recall what Obama said in his 2015 State of the Union. He said, and no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. And that's why over the past 6 years, we've done more than ever to combat climate change, from the way we produce energy to the way we use it. That's why we've set aside more public lands and waters than any administration in history. I think Biden is out to outdo that. And the biggest agenda of them all for the 21st century, called sustainable development, was first introduced as potential law back in 1992 and 1993 by none other than California's Nancy Pelosi. And I'd seriously be remiss if I did not include this in another presentation. Can you comment about Agenda 21? That's H. Conres 353. Why you went to the Rio Earth Summit, Nancy?
The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint, Agenda 21, for global environmental action. HCON Res 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21, to be coordinated under the leadership of a specific office and at the direction of a high-level government official. The resolution also urges the United States to identify and initiate further agreements to protect the global environment and to support the creation of a high-level United Nations Sustainable Development Commission headed by an Undersecretary General. Third and lastly, the President is urged to report to Congress on the progress made on with this action. HCON Res 353 is supported by the administration. I have been in contact with the appropriate offices of the State Department and have incorporated their suggestions into the resolution. The 71 co-sponsors of this measure include one-half the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee and all of the House delegates to the Earth Summit. It is also supported by the major United States non-governmental organizations concerned with the environmental issues. The Earth Summit presented world leaders with an opportunity that should not be lost. We must now embark on a new course that will sustain our planet and its resources for the benefit of future generations. This resolution calls on the United States to assert its leadership to achieve this goal. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. Thanks again to the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee for their recognition of the importance and timeliness of this resolution. We must make the promise of Rio a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It is pretty exciting for us to be here. So for some, it is the first COP meeting. For me, my first one was called Earth Summit.
Her first one was the Rio Earth Summit back in 1992. She's been at this for a very, very long time. And I would say it is her legacy to have UN Agenda 21 realized in her lifetime. And going back to the 30 by 30, I missed an important point here. And going back to the United Nations. These United Nations meetings are always greatly attended by California local, state, and federal legislatures and staff. In fact, at the most recent UN Biological Diversity Conference, COP15, in December of 2022, Craig Rucker of CFACT and I were registered to go to this conference. It would be our first biological diversity conference, well, mine anyway, and the COVID restrictions, even though everywhere else in the world had been eased, the COVID restrictions at this biodiversity conference were so tight that Craig and I were like, we're not going. But over 50 delegation, a delegation of over 50 California state legislators, tribes, and scientists attended to pledge their allegiance to the 30 by 30 plan. And included in that delegation was Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, think Department of Interior Secretary at a California level, who touted, quote, California is proving we can protect nature through world-leading actions like 30 by 30. This new agreement that they came up with includes 23 targets. That's targets on top of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and their 169 targets, and 4 goals to be accomplished by 2030. There's 2030 again, with the longer range goal of, check it out, living in harmony with nature by the year 2050. Obviously, feeding the poor is not high priority to California's leaders. But in the name of the public trust, locking up land and shutting farmers and ranchers off from water used for growing the nation's food is. My talk today is titled, Let Them Eat Bugs, and I'm gonna get there. What I'm doing is hopefully presenting another terrible equation that is creating a food crisis, that's adding up to a food crisis, big or small. And alongside an anti-human and anti-cow movement goading for protein erected in a 3D lab petri dish, plant-based everything, celebrities and major organizations like the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization support, help me out here, entomophagy. In other words, humans eating insects in the name of saving planet Earth. I'd like to make a few points and demonstrate more deeply ways that we ranchers and farmers are being forced to change, with the likelihood of our older ranchers, like my parents who are in their early 80s, saying, we can't do this anymore. It's already such a physically laborious job. You just try not to get hurt, knowing that you will. It is emotionally taxing, having a hurt animal or losing one. We are so dependent on the weather, hoping for snow, rain, and sun, but not the terrible winds we constantly get for weeks. Thank you, I'm sorry. The voluminous, old and new regulations that we have to read, understand, and comply by, most of them you needing an attorney to translate them. Endless. Early this year, we received a complaint letter from the California State Water Resources Control Board saying satellite imagery suggests in August 2022, we were filling one of our stockwater ponds during a time when Gavin Newsom's executive order on drought was still in place. The fine could be as much as $10,000 a day on the days that we were supposedly illegally watering using our own water rights. Luckily, I just happened to take a video in August showing that pond, and it's a large pond, in fact, it was supposed to be bigger than it is, but it would cost my parents $10,000 a year to have the California Department of Fish and Wildlife inspect it every year. So they opted to do a smaller one. Thank you so much. But I happened to take a video showing that water is lower than it had been since my dad built it. And it's huge. It's several times this room. And it's what we use for watering our fields, our lower fields. We've not heard back from the State Water Resources Control Board. My mom has sent in all the evidence, and it's been months now. And we wonder when the other shoe is going to drop. Instead of offering just compensation for chipping away at our property rights, government grants are being encouraged everywhere. Are you all noticing government grants being thrown out everywhere? Good or bad, you know how I think of government grants. It's somebody else's money. It's a taxpayer's money. So I think, whose $2 that went towards some environmental grant, conservation, easement, land grabbing initiative, whose $2 went to that grant that could have made the difference of that person having a half a gallon milk for the week or a full gallon of milk for their family? So obviously, water is a big issue for farming and ranching and food and byproducts. Without it, we do not exist. Documents galore suggest farmers and ranchers are using most of California's water. But the truth is, ag only uses 40% of the water we can capture. Municipality, 10% of the water that we can capture. And the environment, due to laws, gets 50% of the water that we can capture. Emphasizing that it's impossible to capture all water that falls or melts to the ground. So correctly, the environment receives the majority of the water. But I can assert that the water and the water rights that we have on our ranch, all adjudicated, riparian, historic, senior, and junior, not only do we use that water to properly feed our animals and our pastures and keep the trees green and the grass green and the plants green, but that water also goes to serve the environment. All the animals that exist on our ranch, because we love them too. Under the 30 by 30 executive orders and other conservation agendas, agriculture water will necessarily decrease by an unknown percentage. Municipality will remain the same, likely, and the environment's water will obviously increase. This is a threat to our food and fiber producers. It is a threat to our water rights. You can see former Department of Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt, he also was governor of Arizona at one time, saying, with public opinion now moving our way, this was back in 2012, nationally and in the Northwest, we ratcheted up our efforts in Congress to finish off the Elwha dams. Slowly, at what seemed a glacial pace, funding started to flow, finally coming to fruition in the Obama administration. He went on to say that others will have their own compelling priorities, others meaning dams and people, and there are still 75,000 dams for consideration of destruction. How many have heard of, in the headlines, the momentous agreement to destroy the Klamath River dams? How many? How many have not heard of this? Wow, quite a few. Would you be surprised to hear that this is the largest dam destruction project in worldwide history? The Klamath River is where we live. The Klamath River Basin is where we live, where our ranch is. And right now, the dam, one of the 4 dams, clean, green, hydroelectric, renewable energy dams, multi-beneficial, drought control, fire suppression, recreation, irrigation, all sorts of awesome benefits is being destroyed right now. and all the people on the homes on the lakes that are behind these dams are suffering. This is based on junk science. The EIR and EIS is the environmental impact reports and environmental impact studies that we've had to read in order to make public comment. Thousands and thousands of pages. I believe the first one was over 6,000 pages. And in that 6,000 page document, my sister, who was a biology major, found where the people behind these destructive plans, and they are destructive, gave themselves 60 years or more as for takings of any endangered species that they wanted as these dams come down and water oozes hundreds of miles out to sea. The oozing is because there's over 20 million cubic yards of sediment collected by these dams. These dams work as scrubbers. So as scrubbing water, the water that's going down the river is actually cleaner now than when the dams came in 60 to 100 years ago. But that doesn't matter to them. The truth, as you all know, does not matter. So the dams, the Klamath River dams, and the Robinsons are certainly aware of these issues. The Klamath River dams, do I have a pointer?
Yeah, let's see, the big middle button on that.
Oh, okay. So here's Wairika. This is Oregon. The Robinsons live somewhere up here, beautiful up here. And our ranch is somewhere right here. The Klamath River starts in southern Oregon. You can see there's just a tad of it in southern Oregon. But its headwaters are here in these lakes in southern Oregon. And these lakes are low water, warm water lakes. This is not a normal river system. The National Geographic calls the Klamath River system an upside system, meaning that normally these large rivers start in cold, high mountains where the water is cold and the water quality is beautiful. And this is where the anadromous fish going to spawn would like to be, versus in this warm, mucky water, actually, which the salmon cannot survive in. Along this river, before these dams went in, and these dams were put in specifically for clean, green, renewable energy to provide energy to southern Oregon and northern California. But these dams went in a perfect location because naturally, this area, if you come visit us, which I hope you do, is volcanic. It's like high desert volcanic. It's beautiful. And so along this river are natural dikes, 130 feet. Salmon can't fly that high. And so those dikes were destroyed in order to create this amazing hydroelectric clean green energy system that would provide energy to over 60,000 homes. Some of you might be kind of pleased to know that the man who devised this beautiful, incredible system, J.C. Boyle, graduated from Stanford. And we should really have a J.C. Boyle Day, but, we've got to forget that these dams ever were great because, the fish are more important than the people now. There's a fish hatchery at one of the first dam, which is called, I think, here's the first dam. This is Copco Dam, and there's a fish hatchery down here, and this beautiful lake, it goes way back, and it's boating and fishing. There's wild horses here. There's so many different biomes and plants, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And then behind that is another series of dams with another big lake, and that's where a lot of people, 100 people, have moved to retire because it too is absolutely spectacular. But down in here is a fish hatchery, and so we raise coho salmon. And supposedly, the reason for destroying these dams is because coho are endangered and threatened only in this part of the world. Because you can go to Alaska right now or during spawning season and they're flopping around on somebody's yard. Or you can go to Costco anywhere in the United States and you're going to be able to buy this endangered, threatened species called coho. But for some reason, this fish is endangered only in this area and then down into the Sacramento area too, just a couple hours down the way. This fish hatchery, as I said, produces coho. One day, and I'm a little bit off track here, but I want to share this story. As I've been over the years trying to alert the American people not only about UN Agenda 21 and its radical, overarching goals, land taking, land stealing, freedom and liberty stealing goals for the 21st century. I've also been trying to sound the alarm of this, the largest dam destruction project in worldwide history. And so I took a friend who's very active in Los Angeles area, and he drove all the way up, and we went and visited the hatchery. And in the hatchery are fish runs, and there are little fingerlings, little fish in there. And you see a big fish run for, like a swimming pool, for steelhead, and I can't remember the other salmon. But then, and it's lots of fish, lots of them, millions of them. And then you go over to this other one for coho. It's labeled coho, and it's fully netted. And there's not a lot of fish in there. And so I go up to the fish and wildlife employee who still had his fish and game. Because remember, this is not about game anymore. It's about rewilding America. And he was proud to be part of Fish and Game, now Fish and Wildlife. And I asked him, if the coho are so important, why is it that there's less fish being raised here, less coho, than other salmon? And he laughs and he says, oh, it's not so funny. By law, we have to keep the coho fish count low. And I said, why? I have this on tape. I haven't found it, but, and I didn't tell him I was recording. And he says, I asked him why, and he says, to destroy the dams, of course. How does this affect the farmers and ranchers around the area? These folks will use a tactic which is called full basin management. Has anybody heard about that? Full basin management means all water must be controlled, surveilled, and monitored, especially during drought years, and the priority of water goes to the fish, in this case, the coho salmon. So if you have water rights in that area, they play second fiddle to the coho salmon. And in drought years, when your pastures and your animals need water, you need water, the fish get it first. It's incredible. It is another way to nudge us people in agriculture out of doing what we do best. That's another look at Copco Iron Gate. This is the first dam. It's 180 some odd miles up from the mouth of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. This is the timeline for removal. And you can see, if it's not too small, you can see, reservoir and tributary restoration. And restoration all through here. There's several tribes who have accepted this dam destruction project because they get millions and millions of dollars in restoration projects. But the tribe, the Shasta, which these dams exist on, aren't even part of the equation. Why? Because their ancient burial grounds are under some of the lakes, and they know if these dams are destroyed and the water is out in the ocean, so are the bones of their beloved family members. So because they're not for this agenda, they are shut out of it. We can see COPCO for right here, 2023, COPCO 2, demolition. And that's what it looks like right now. California government agencies are working hard to change historic, adjudicated, and riparian water rights. Harmless sounding initiatives like local cooperative solutions, for example, would have you believe that volunteering is a choice. But when it comes to water, things are rapidly changing to enforcement. Here's what Wade Crowfoot, and I mentioned him earlier about going to that COP15 in Canada. Here's what Wade Crowfoot said, not there, but at a conference in California, when talking about these new voluntary water agreements.
Impact on communities. So we came up with these voluntary agreements, and they're enforceable agreements, but they're called voluntary because they're bringing everybody together.
Is that incredible or what? I'm glad you caught on to that. So voluntary but forcible or enforceable. Despite an already wet year giving us some sort of reprieve from a long but not historical drought in much of California, Gavin Newsom will not ease up on his water mandates. Last week, the State Water Resources Control Board, you know, the same ones who wrote us a letter, ordered junior water right owners like us to curtail more water, use it less so that it can be, and so not filling our livestock ponds and irrigating pastures that we could be, or using ditches that we might be that feed all sorts of species and creates all sorts of habitat. And it won't be long before they start coming after our riparian, which are the strongest, and our senior water rights. Without water, there is no farming, there is no rancher, and there is no food. Which brings me to my next and second, and there is no third, deeper issue that I'm going to go into. Predators of cattle. First of all, cows are simply amazing. Don't get too distracted by the videos. The upper one is, well, that's my bull Jefferson, like Thomas Jefferson, and he's playing with a recycling bin, but he towers over those panels now. So he is much bigger, and he today is probably off doing what he is supposed to be doing so that we can continue ranching. And then the lower video I'll get into in just a second here. But cows are recyclers, they're environmentalists, and they're firefighters. As I've shared with you in past conferences, over 99% of the cow is recycled into some sort of byproduct. You are touching one of them, several of them right now. Cows eat byproducts of food production, fruit pits, potato skins, almond hulls. They improve grass and help soil stop erosion. They press natural grass seeds in the ground and provide fertilizer too. Can you imagine that? Mark was talking about that horrible fertilizer earlier. Cattle can graze on high grassland and areas so steep and rocky you and I could not put a fire out in those areas, but they could help curtail depress, whatever the word is, I can't think of it. Fire suppression, I have it right there. So they do all these amazing things and provide you and me with all these amazing products. And this video actually was given to me by our wolf biologist. We in California have a wolf biologist now. And this is one of the wildfires from, I think it was 2021, that was in our area. And in the background, you can see that the fire is just kind of taking off. But in the foreground, that is grazed land. And if you look closely, if it was a little bit darker, you'll see sparks flying through, but what you won't see is grass catching on fire, but just in a few places. So they're pretty awesome. And, but cows have all these attackers. They have these cow haters, and what did I do with my fossil fuel glasses? And you know, the United Nations has always been a big, you know, anti-cow racist. Okay, so in the Global Biodiversity Assessment Report on their page 773, the United Nations says, and the scientists they chose to work with, says that in an agricultural world in which most human beings are peasants, should be able to support 5 to 7 billion people, probably more if the large agricultural population were supported by an industry promoting agricultural activity. In contrast, a reasonable estimate for an industrialized world society at the present North American material standard of living would be 1 billion people. At the more frugal European standard of living, 2 to 3 billion people would be possible. And what do they blame? The dietary habits, like those of us Westerners, that lie at the root of many of our troubles. So like the UN and globalist leaders, one of my former Google superiors, Eric Schmidt, was at a global conference, called Milken. And this was in, I think, 2016. It was the Milken Global Summit. And listen to what he had to say.
What has changed is that people have both the money and the ideas are now coming together. What I want to do, as just a matter of wrapping up the session, is to give you 4 or 5, which I think are the next really interesting moonshots. The first one I call is nerds over cattle. So it turns out that as much as we like cows contribute to up to 15% of global warming because of the various things cows do. And the fact of the matter is that if we could somehow use plants as part of the food and nutrition cycle rather than meat, right, with the same benefits that meat had but based on plant-based approaches, we could materially both affect the climate change issues, but also because of the technologies dramatically lower the cost of food globally, and everybody needs to eat. We all understand this very well. So from the standpoint of the impact on the environment and farming and use of water and so forth, there's an extraordinary set of things to do. So think of it as synthetic food production from vast databases of organic compounds, molecules, and proteins, which we can now assemble.
Yum! Mark talked a little bit about it. It's 3D printing of our meat. But wouldn't you rather order from my cut list? Look at all those beautiful steaks. That's about 450 pounds of steak in one steer. And you could get it custom cut, and it could be dry aged, and it's beautiful, and it's healthy, and it's good for you. But they don't want you to eat that. They want you to eat bugs. So beef versus bug protein steak is 25 grams of protein for about 3.5 ounces, about the palm of your hand. Raw grasshoppers, 14 to 28 grams. Red ants, 14 grams. And that darn little caterpillar, 7 grams. By the way, as I was preparing for this conference, I was talking to a man who had a pet centipede. And he said, he was telling me a story about how he told his centipede to go get the paper and make it snappy. A half an hour later, the man went outside and he said, I thought I told you to get the paper a half hour ago. And he told me that what his pet centipede said back was, well, I had to put my shoes on. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization say this about livestock. Livestock are one of the most significant contributors to today's most serious environmental problems. Urgent action is required to remedy the situation. Cattle rearing, which I guess I cattle rear, is also a major source of land and water degradation. And then we have these. This is OR 103. He's currently no longer with us. You could see he's got a bad leg. We don't know what happened to him. Could have been hit by a car, but something happened to him. And even in that state, he was able to travel hundreds of miles and kill 5 calves at our neighbors and travel and do harm to other cattle. Colorado, if you're from Colorado, you voted in 2022. Look at that squeaker vote. Look at that, 50.91% to no, almost 50% to have wolves in your state. By the year, starting this year and into the year 2026, slated 30 to 50 wolves brought into your state and dispersed and distributed all over. But check out how these animals operate. There's one, this is near us. This is a critter camera put up in the National Forest, which is about 10 miles, not even 10 miles from where our ranch is. 2, 3. By the way, as you're counting, we are now on our 3rd litter, and we haven't heard how many new cute, cuddly, carnivore-eating carnivores are we have now. Look at that, carrying a big cow leg. And this one's interesting. The story would likely be different if those cows had calves with them. Here's our cows. One of our cute little heifer calves born on January 2nd. It's now like the 12th or something like that. Got murdered last night. You can see the drag marks. It ended up there. I've already picked it up because I don't want to have the cows stress anymore, but you can see blood right there. Anyway, here's the drag line, and here's where a big struggle was, you can tell. But the cows, look, they're just the cows
out here
seriously
going,
mourn
where is
for the
that
death
cow?
of other cows.
Something died.
So we have, this is, well, I'll let the video talk. Here we are looking at the fladry, F-L-A-D-R-Y. Fladry is a combination of, you could see flags and hot wire. And this is to keep cows in and hopefully deter the wolves from coming into this pasture. Normally this pasture would not be grazed right now. The cows would be out and about throughout the ranch. But because we've had depredations by wolves already, we are keeping a tight watch on our mom cows and our calves. This light right here is called a fox light, and it flashes all different colors. And the wolves are supposed to think that it's someone with a flashlight, but anyway, who knows if all this stuff works, but we're trying to protect our calves and our cows. This is an area we call the Willows, and surrounded by, this pasture is surrounded by the fladry. 2 miles of fladry. But where the wolf tracks, we have a baby calf missing, cow number 20, calf number 20. And the night it went missing, we also had another 200-pound bull calf attacked with lethal wounds that ended up dying. But this is the fence line that the wolves came down. There's 4 or 5 wolf tracks up and down this fence line, and that's where we think that they took off with our calf number 20. 4 or 5 means 4 or 5 wolves that we can identify by their tracks. That pasture should have tons of grass by this time of year, but it doesn't because we've had to keep our cows confined. It's 8:40 on Friday night, and about a half hour ago, I noticed something in our cows. It looks pretty light out, but it's not. I've got a flashlight, and I'm walking some steep terrain looking for what I think could be a dead calf. When I first flew up the road and up into this, into the pasture down below me, there was a canine. What kind of canine? I have no idea. Either coyote or a big coyote or a wolf. But here's the thing: the cows are used to coyotes. They've been existing and living and defending their calves from coyotes for decades now. So for them to behave the way they're behaving means it's some kind of different predator. Could be bear, could be mountain lion, but the fact that I did see a canine with my naked eye way up the hill says to me it was probably a wolf. And so this is the new reality for us ranchers as, I just tripped, sorry. I'm on pretty steep clay-based soil, and it's just rained, so it's super slick, but I'm going to slide all the way down. Anyway, I go on to say that this is the new reality. By the way, back in 2010, we were told in Siskiyou County, which is where our ranch is, in the Klamath River Basin, that it's not a matter of when. Mark kind of said something like this earlier. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when we will get wolves. And then a couple years later, lo and behold again, all of a sudden, a wolf called OR7, Oregon 7, meandered its way into Northern California. And OR7 is gone, but then OR85, Oregon 85, with a female wandered into California, and we now have a pack called the Whaleback Pack, meaning the whaleback part of Mount Shasta. We have a whaleback pack, and that is the pack that now is on its third litter. My neighbors, by the way, my ranching neighbors, have lost over 20 calves. Some cows, in fact, they had a cow taken down the other day, and that's the only ones that they found and that they can identify that it was a wolf depredation. California is trying to help us out by giving us compensation for depredation, but the work that we have to do is a lot. And this is my final video.
I know I look just terrible right now. It's after 10 p.m. on a Sunday. After church, I came home, and since it's the last burn day, just got to work on burn piles, blackberry bushes, all sorts of things to.
Let me speed it up. So I was burning all day. My face was covered. It's late at night. I had to put my animals away, ducks, ducklings, geese, feed the animals, feed the cows, feed the calves. And I get a text, I think it was 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and I get a text saying OR85 is on Table Rock. Table Rock is a mountain. Actually, you saw it, that flat mountain in the back. We own half of that mountain. And that means OR85 could likely be on our property. So an OR85 is the apex male, and he's the one who's been responsible for many of the kills that have happened. They do DNA testing to verify. So long story short, I get the text saying OR85 is there, and at the same time, one of our cows was mooing. She was bawling. And so I knew, and this is during calving season, and I knew that one of our calves was missing. So I went out, drove around for hours, hoping to find on a 5,000-acre ranch, although they weren't all, out that far, to see if I could figure out if there was blood or anything. Because if you do not find your depredated animal or your hurt animal right away, other animals like coyotes, birds, bears, all sorts of things start coming in and picking on that animal. And if they can't, Fish and Wildlife cannot identify and say, hey, this was wolf depredation, you're out $1,500 or whatever you identify as the value of that animal. So our cows are getting much harder to work with.
So I still have the two crazy ones.
This is what I call cattle spa day, because if I called it working the cows, the environmentalists might think it's bad to give your cows vitamins and pertinent vaccine, a pertinent vaccine. And the white that you see on them is just a fly powder to keep them comfortable. This is after this long winter, they've calved, and so you'll see that they're losing their winter hair, so they don't look so great, but we're getting them through we're giving them cattle spa day. So this is the last group that needs to go into the alleyway and into the chute and get taken care of, and then they get to go back with their babies. But I'm having trouble. The last cows are always the most dangerous cows. They don't want to go. They want to get the heck out of there.
So I still have.
So here we go. The concern is, are you going to get trampled? And I turned off the video, but let me show you what happens. This video isn't very long because I stopped filming. You should have heard my cussing. What that cow ended up doing, which was one of the wild ones in the back, she jumped 3 gates. These are old, heavy gates, breaking all 3 of them. Got into the next pasture, tore down that fence, ran down the road, hopped into another pasture, taking down that fence, and her baby was right near us. So anyway, okay, finally, bugs. Let's eat. Hey, Benjamin and Franklin, would you two help me distribute a few things? So as you can probably tell, things are getting frustrating. We're so tired, exhausted from government overreach, just wondering when the other shoe is going to drop, but still blessed to be stewards of the land and caretakers of the animals. And because you've been so patient and excellent, you've been excellent little critters, and I know you must be hungry for lunch. I brought you a little something. So as we serve you participants, and while these guys are buzzing around the room, I want to give you a bit of encouragement. Movie stars are eating bugs.
This is a powder derived from the mealworm, and it's a insect protein just been approved by the EU for human consumption.
You're not just getting me to eat dirt, are you?
No, man, I wouldn't play you, bro.
I don't want to touch it.
I'm gonna.
Oh, she's doing it. What are you doing?
I am here to reveal my hidden talent, eating micro livestock, cornworms. They're still alive. Extraordinary. Very moist, chewy. Can't quite describe the flavor, but need a little water.
All right, I think you guys need a little bit more encouragement eating those bugs. So I'm heading across the river where there are massive grasshoppers. We're just waiting for the time when crossing a river like this that runs all the way through our property 24/7, 365 days a year becomes illegal to the human being and cattle. I just crossed the river. Look at this. And if you think catching those things is easy, it's not. And they're all in every pasture we have. Everyone. Wearing my big bug-like glasses to disguise myself. Maybe they'll think I'm one of them. Caught it. Here it goes. No joke. Legs and all. It tastes like crusty grass.
I
cut this cricket today while I was feeding my baby calves that need replacement milk because they lost their moms, and lo and behold, this was right near them. I grabbed it. It's a cricket. It's been in my pocket. It hurts for some reason. Maybe it's the spiny legs, I don't know. But I am about ready to try this thing. Ugh. And he's not even cute. Whoa! Okay, not even close to a grasshopper. Grasshoppers taste like grass. Crickets taste like, ugh, burnt coffee maybe.
I put some corn on some fly paper, and check out all these flies. Some of them are fake, some of them are drawn in. Oh, and look at that, a big old mosquito. This is like breakfast, lunch, and dinner in one setting. We'll see if the chickies want it. So everybody's curious what's going on over here with the paper. Oh, now the dog's here. And look at these chickens. They just went to town on this paper because no way, little guard dog, am I going to eat these flies. I'm out here planting the garden. It's a little late, but we're getting it in. And oh my gosh, look what I found. Food, protein. Look at that. Seen some bigger ones in here, but I gave them to the chickens. Oh my gosh, this one's long. This thing is like a snake. Look how long that is. So here it is, that long, snaky looking thing. Oh no, I've done this before when I was a kid. Why? Why? When I've got pastures of yummy meat producing cattle, why?
So due to time, I just want to thank you, and thank you for being with my emotionalness these days. If we are forced out, others don't get food. And so I'm asking you to support your local farmers and your ranchers. Bypass those convenient grocery stores that are going along with these globalist agendas. Get to know your ranchers and farmers. If they have your same values, purchase from them. They'll deliver amazing, could be non-GMO, non-messenger RNA food. But this is how we have to get our country, our freedom, our liberty back, is by supporting people like us and supporting the mom and pop shops and letting the Bud Lights and the Walmarts of the world either suffer or go out of business. So with that, I say bon appetit.